welcome to the Basics for Blokes YouTube channel, and very excited today to be chatting to one of my footy heroes, David the Ox Schwarz, and obviously me being a passionate Melbourne supporter, spent many a day at the MCG cheering you on from the other side of the fence, mate. And you certainly thrilled me many times with some of those big pack crushing marks and twisting round. Just, I always thought that you were one of the most mobile big blokes I've ever seen, which is probably why your knees rebelled like they did, moving such a mass so freely. But thanks very much for joining us today, mate. And as our listeners and viewers would be aware, that Basics for Blokes is all about men taking ownership of their health. And it's really great that David has been prepared to be transparent and talk to us today about some struggles he's had that affected his health, and some really gutsy and courageous steps that you've taken, mate, to make your life better after those challenges. So do you want to just fill us in a bit with what the background was?
Yeah, well, first of all, Richard, thanks for having me. I think with most athletes, they have their own story, and often it's not surrounded by the sport that they're playing or what they've been chosen or what they've been blessed with to do. So, and my story is probably a little bit different. I lost my old man. My dad got shot and murdered in front of me when I was young. So I kind of got a taste of life's ups and downs very early. I was only 7 when that happened. Dad had already lost nearly 40 grand on the punt. We sold our house for 13 grand. So Dad had already lost 3 houses before I turned 8. So I got a bit of an understanding that, you know, life probably is not all roses and not all, you know, shiny and, you know, euphoric, as most kids would hope it to be. We moved the country into Sunbury, and Sunbury gave us a great opportunity to be who we wanted to be, and we chased our dreams of playing sport, me and my sister. At the age of 14, you know, I got asked to go down to Melbourne Footy Club. I'd won, I think, 5 or 6 league best and fairest, and footy for me was pretty easy. Probably my love was basketball. So I played a lot of basketball, umpired a lot of basketball, and I was up the stadium 7 days a week. And but I did love footy. Like, don't get me wrong, I love the Hawks. I was a Hawthorn supporter. So I did what any other normal kid would do. You just chase your dreams of playing sport. And then at the age of 14, I went down to Melbourne. I was a Zone E back then. You had to play where you were told. Even though Hawthorn tried to get me down there, it just didn't work out. And thankfully, because I really love Melbourne. And I got down there, and almost at the same time, I got asked to go and go to the Trots, wag a day off school and go down to from Salesian College in Sunbury and head on down to Moonee Valley, down to the harness. You had to look 18 back then to put on bets. There was no internet and there was no mobile phone. So me being the biggest and the ugliest and the oldest looking, I put the bets on, and surprise, surprise, my first bet I ever had, I won. And I won nearly $60. And I think from that day on, my life changed, because I had that thing called dopamine running through my brain that just sent off these wild, euphoric, amazing feelings in my body. And from that day on, I chased that feeling again. It just drew me in. And that day from the age of 14 to 32, I gambled every day of my life. So yeah, I was kind of hooked pretty early. And then I was lucky enough to have a playing career with the Demons, which kind of supported the habit because I was earning good money. So I travelled through my whole footy career being a gambler. And back then you couldn't gamble on sport. So it was all on the horses, dogs, trots, casino, poker machine. So that was the only thing you bet on. So you couldn't, and thankfully that you couldn't bet on footy or bet on other sports, because I'm sure I would have probably wavered down that line, because of, you know, the information that you get and so forth. And it wasn't until I'd retired, and, you know, I just couldn't stop. I was just, And the reason I couldn't stop is because I didn't want to. I loved it. Like, I really enjoyed the thrill of trying to beat the system. I used to drink a lot too when I was gambling, which didn't help because I'd become 10 foot and bulletproof. And I was surrounded by people that loved the punt. I was surrounded by high worth individuals that could afford to lose, but still didn't have the illness that I had, which was addiction. So coupled with that, I just kept finding myself surrounded by dickheads. And some of them were good people, but most of them were just dickheads. And it took a bit of fate for me to meet my partner, and then I had a son, and then I had one of my best friends eyeball me and just say, "Hey, you got to get off the punt here. You've had everything given to you. You've worked really hard. You've had houses and monies and cars and all that sort of stuff. But you've blown it. That's your decision. You can't do that now. You've got a family now. Pull your bloody head in." So that was my rock bottom moment. It was May the 3rd, 2005, and I'm really pleased to say I haven't had a bet since. So, but between May the 3rd, 2005 and today, it just hasn't happened through luck. It just hasn't happened through chance. It's happened through bloody hard work.
Yeah.
It's happened through a real commitment to what I see my future being. And is it rosy? No, it's not. It's not rosy still, but I'm not gambling. You have emotional highs and lows. You have relationship breakdowns. That's life. That's your journey. No one sits on the highway and just goes straight down the road. We veer off and we come back on, and we've got to adjust to the conditions. Sometimes the road's flooded, so you've got to stop for a while and then come back around. And so I'm very conscious that you're going to hit hurdles along the way. But I make sure I put enough hurdles in front of myself that I know that if I do get over the first one or first two or first three, that, gambling's not going to come up, because I've got so many things in place to protect me from going back to a place I just don't want to go to.
And so can you identify a moment when the term that I use in our basics for life sort of world is that when you actually took ownership, like when we've got whether it's a health issue or a habit or an addiction, at some stage, we have to take a conscious decision to say, I am going to take charge of this. Instead of living just by default, you're actually deciding to start living by some sort of design that you're in charge of.
Yeah.
And that you're going to take the ownership back. Can you identify a moment when you felt that with your gambling?
So the one thing that gamblers do, they have numbers and dates, and they have a great memory, because you need to have a good memory, because we're all liars. So you need to know pretty much everything at any one time, and you've got to have really good recall. It was July 27th, 2008, and I'd already been clean for nearly 3 years. But being clean is one thing, but actually understanding and getting it right takes a bit of practice and a bit of time. Yeah. So I gave up on May the 3rd, 2005. After I gave up gambling, I took up smoking. Never smoked before in my life. At 32, I started smoking 2 packets a day, just straight off the bat. So I've just replaced one addiction with another. Yeah. I finally got off the cigarettes and I started smoking Wee Willem cigars. I'm having 40 a day, and I'm not puffing them, I'm smoking them. So we're talking about lung busters, and we're talking about someone who loves sport, playing golf, fishing, but I'm still playing basketball and I'm puffing down these stupid friggin' cigars. Anyway, I finally got off that, and I'm doing a lot of radio at the time. And during radio, you got a lot of time to spare in between ad breaks and commercials and news breaks. So I started drinking coffee. I was having 22 triples a day. So I'm just drinking coffee like it's coming out, like you wouldn't believe it. In the end, Karen, my partner, says to me, you're just replacing one thing with another. You're not better. Like you're still an addict. So with that, I did some research and I found a lady named Jan Beams. Jan Beams is a Melbourne supporter, which is related to Percy Beams, so there's a bit of a connection there. But she was just someone I'd been recommended to go and see, to see if we can work on things that maybe we haven't been able to. We needed a professional. If you've got diabetes, you go to the doctor and the doctor gives you a plan. I just didn't have a plan because it was my own. I've been working on it myself. So reluctantly, I went and saw Jan. And I'm 6'4" German and pretty proud. So for me to go and put my hand up and ask for help is pretty rare. So I go in and see Jan and we sit down. She said, "What's going on?" I said, "Oh, these coffee. I can't stop drinking coffee." She said, "Yeah, anything else?" And I said, "Well, funny you say that, Jan, because I used to smoke 40 wee Willems a day." She said, "Yeah, before that?" And I said, "Yeah, you wouldn't believe it. I was smoking 2 packets of Benson Hedges 16s a day from day one." She goes, "Crikey." She said, "Anything before that?" I said, "Well, I've been a punter for 18 years. She said, "Tell me anything else." And I said, "Well, I saw my old man get shot and murdered." She said, "How about we start there?" So straight away, we started dealing with some trauma that I'd been through as a young child, which I'd suppressed. And the best way to explain it was how Jan did, was she said, "Just think of it as like an onion. And over, 30 odd years, you've just put layers and layers and layers and layers and layers over your dad's death and you've never dealt with it." I said, "No." I said, "We've never spoken about it as a family. We've never done anything to get better." So we got my sister in, we got my mother in, and we spoke about it. We dealt with it. And this feeling of relief and just this heaviness was gone, because we actually dealt with a huge problem and a huge bit of trauma in my life, which we'd never dealt with.
Yeah.
And she said, "Look," she said, these other things you do are to make you feel a different way. You don't want to feel a certain way. So you gamble, you drink, you smoke, whatever you do, and you're just masking some of those feelings." So we dealt with the feelings, and this wasn't an overnight thing. Like, we just didn't have an epiphany and, bang, it was done. This was 15 months of hard work, seeing her once every 2 weeks and dealing with everything that was going on. So we did that. I started, it's just a corny phrase, but I saw the light. I just started to see things clearly. I wasn't frustrated. I wasn't upset. And the journey began. The journey didn't begin the day I stopped gambling. The journey began the day I worked on myself, which was July 27th, 2008. That was the day that clarity and assurity became a part of me again, which I hadn't been there for a long, long time.
And so can you recall some of the inner conversations that you had with yourself around that sort of era?
Yeah, stop being a dickhead was number one.
Right.
But it's like when you've got a block of chocolate in the fridge, and you open up the block of chocolate and you have 1 or 2 pieces. Subconsciously, the chocolate's in the fridge.
Yeah.
So you want to keep going back, and that's what addiction is. That's what addiction was for me. I just found it really difficult to break the cycle.
Yeah.
So we had to change. We had to make sure there was no chocolate in the fridge.
Yeah.
Because eventually the cravings will go, and eventually understanding will go. Keeping busy, keeping entertained and entwined, just making sure you're doing something. And the problem was, when I gave up gambling, it wasn't a problem. It became a bit of an issue in the end. But when I gave up gambling, I gave up drinking. So I didn't drink for 4.5 years. I didn't gamble for 4.5 years. I didn't see my footy club for 7 years. Because when I gave up everything, I had to give up everything that was a trigger for me. And my footy club, everyone in the footy club gambled. That was just our culture. So I had to say goodbye to them. And I had to say goodbye to the grog, because they were the things that would just ignite the memories and, memories and smell. And so the things for me, smell and taste, are massive parts of my addiction. And sound. Like, sound is a big, I walk in the casino, I hear chips, clattering. I hear the card machine shuffling. I hear the wheel spinning. I hear the poker machines dinging and zinging. And, I hear the crowd yelling when they've had a win. So that's really powerful for me. So I just had to eliminate smell, taste, sound. So I didn't go into gaming venues. I didn't go into casinos. Didn't go to pubs. I didn't go to footy clubs. All I did is I just worked on myself pretty much for 4.5, 5 years, just to get myself right. And thankfully I had young kids at the time, so it kind of coincided with that. So instead of going to the casino, I was going to 1-year-old birthday parties and 2-year-old birthday parties. I was fishing, I was playing golf. I was just doing really normal things that I would have thought 5 years before I'd never be doing.
So if we go back to some of those, I guess what we would call stimulants, like, the sound of the chips and the poker machines going and all that sort of stuff, what went on inside of you when you heard that?
Oh, I had to get over there and have a look. So it was intrigue.
Yeah.
But it could almost, if I heard the wheel spinning, I could take you back to certain moments when I was punting, and I could almost place myself back there. So it was just familiarity with certain things that, and they're good. Some of them were good times. Like I'm not, my punting wasn't all disaster and mayhem. And this is the problem with, alcoholism or, drug taking or gambling. A lot of the moments you have are really good moments in your life, especially if you're drinking. So if you're an alcoholic, you're surrounded with all the good times. So 18th, 21st, 40th, all these weddings, celebrations. So they're not all shit times. So you've got to kind of separate yourself, and you've got to try and highlight the shit times and minimize the good times if you actually want to get better. Because if it's the other way around, you're not going to be able to give up your best friend, and your best friend being that addiction. For me, my best friend was gambling. My second best friend was the booze. And my third best friend was, I don't even know. It was daylight. So I just had to recognise that the booze and the punt were not my good mates. They were my shit mates. So I had to basically piss them off.
Yeah. And I think you really highlight an issue that I think is part of life, is that so often the actual activity brings you pleasure, but it creates pain. Like the activity is enjoyable and fun, but it creates pain. I mean, if we look at and for a lot of us, it's a painful issue, but probably people that have, say, an affair, for example, in a relationship, it's great fun while they're having the affair with the other person, but it's destroying if there's a family and stuff like that. The outcome is that it creates pain and destruction. But the actual activity in itself, and I think that's one of the things we need to be honest about, and I honour you for being honest about that you acknowledge that the gambling in itself, the activity, was fun, and that was good. The problem was that the destruction that it caused.
Yeah, and I think with gambling's a little bit different, because gambling, so I was in a relationship when I was gambling, so the only damage I was doing was to myself. So I wasn't, I was probably absent to friends and family a lot of the time, which gamblers do, and I accept that. But the destruction which an affair will cause, I didn't have any of that, because it was all on my own shoulders. It wasn't until I had a family that I realised, I'm actually blowing everything here for my future.
Yeah.
And then it kind of hit home. But you're right, absolutely. The gambling was amazing. I travelled the world. I went to Vegas. I went to Happy Valley in Hong Kong. I went to Monte Carlo Casino. Look, I went everywhere where the punt was. I went. I went to casinos that you would never even heard of in Amsterdam and blah, 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 blah. And I had a great time. I really did. I really had a great time. But if I could take my time back again, I wouldn't walk into one of them, because I just know that the risk far outweighed the reward. So what if I won a couple of $100? Who gives you, or even a couple of thousand, or even 100,000? It wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah.
Because what it was doing to me was eating me up inside, and I was doing shit that I just didn't think I'd ever do. And thankfully I didn't go down the drug path, because with my personality, I just would have been, I'd hate to think if I ever touched a drug, because I think I would have been cooked. Because for those that don't know and who are watching, addiction is an illness. It's a diagnosed illness. It's not, and I mentioned diabetes before. If you've got diabetes, you go to the doctor says, yep, you've got type 1 or type 2 diabetes, whatever it is, type 2. which is treatable, but he will then give you a plan. And the plan will be, you need to take insulin twice a day. You need to get off bloody soft drink. You need to get off sugar. You need to use a balanced diet. You need to be exercising 3 days a week. Now, if you do all that, guess what? Your diabetes is going to be okay. It's the same with addiction, with gambling, drugs, alcohol, sex, food, whatever it is. If you follow the plan of a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist, whoever it is, they put a plan in place for you to deal with your addiction, you can treat your addiction. If you don't follow that plan, the same thing will happen. You will spiral. Probably invariably you'll hit rock bottom at some stage, but you're going to be suffering with this illness, because this illness is something that, and I don't want to get complicated, but we have dopamine in our brain. We have a wiring. Now, Richard, the way your brain is wired is completely different to mine, and mine is different because I do have this illness. So I know that when I gamble and I drink, I get this pleasure, this mighty pleasure in my brain, because I'm releasing copious amounts of dopamine, much, much more than what would. So if you have a $10 bet on a horse, much more than what you would be releasing. And that's the illness. And it's something that a lot of people don't understand. And for those that are living with an addict, I can promise you 100% of them, not 99% of them, 100% of them would say, why don't you just stop? Why don't you just stop? Try telling a diabetic to stop producing, no insulin. We would stop if we could, but we just can't, because we're different. We've got an illness. Mm. So I think for those who are involved with someone with an addiction, there's a lot more to it than just asking someone to stop. They need help. They need professional help, and they need time. It just doesn't happen overnight.
So how important was it for you to have anybody around you that reinforced your belief in yourself, or showed you a belief that they believed in you, that you could overcome it?
Yeah, I think it's important. You got to have a rock. You got to have somebody you can bounce off. I think my circumstances might be a little bit different, in that when you play elite sport, you got to have self-belief.
Yeah.
You got to have thick skin, because everyone's critiquing you on a daily basis. But when you're dealing with something that you don't know, which is what I was dealing with, bloody oath, I needed help. And I had a handful of good mates. My family were unwavering. And I know a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people don't have the support networks to be able to stop them from falling, and when they do fall, get them back up. So yeah. I did have that. I had a footy club that was reaching out to me all the time, which they got the message pretty loud and clear that I wasn't ready. And then when I was ready, I let them know, and they welcomed me back with open arms. And I think that's what's great about sporting clubs. And I always say this, that sporting clubs are one entity that are amazing for a number of reasons. So if someone dies, we grieve together. If someone is down on their luck, we all dig in and we help. If financially someone is just been, whatever happens, we all dig in and we raise some money for them. If they get an illness, any sort of illness, you've got multiple people there to help. If you've got a good club, you've got, from the president down to the coach, down to the bloody boot starter, you've got people there that you can talk to. And that's why I love sporting clubs. And that's why all sporting clubs need to be safe, so that and let's be honest, sporting clubs aren't there for us old folk. They're there for our kids, so that our kids can come into the sporting clubs. They can be safe, they can be healthy, they can be happy, and they come out better people. And I think that should be the end goal of all sporting clubs.
And I think you touch on a really strong point that I'm passionate about, is that I reckon I think schools and sporting clubs are almost the last bastions of community in society. We just don't have that sense of village. Historically, people kind of lived in villages, like country towns in Australia, particularly, where there was a sense of community and unity in the town. But we don't really have that. I don't think we have that sense of community anymore. And that's why I'm really passionate about my work as a sports chaplain, is that I want to be part of building a community, because we're created to live in communities.
Yeah.
And outside of footy clubs today, there's not much opportunity for us to be in a community.
No, I think, look, a lot of it's gone online. A lot of it's about, how many clicks and how many views. But you want real? Go down to the local netball, go down to the local cricket, go down to the local football clubs, basketball clubs, and actually sit down with a cup of coffee, grab a snag, and chew the fat with other parents and other people. Yeah. You'll learn more in 20 minutes of talking to people, and a lot of it's crap. Let's be honest. Yeah. A lot of it's rumour and innuendo. But you deal with that. There's a lot of nepotism with parents in particular about little Johnny and living their lives through that. If you can see past all that, sport and community, sport and being involved in team sport in particular, I don't think there's anything more therapeutic for our youth than being involved, because you learn every basic in life. You learn to how to overcome issues, confidence, enjoyment, how to fit in, rejection. Like every emotion that we go through in later life, you learn it in sport. You learn to pick out who's an arsehole. Yeah. Because every community, you got a village idiot, you got a village arsehole, then you got some really unbelievable human beings that you'll meet along the way too. And if you can get rid of all the shit and then attract yourself to good people, well, you're half a chance. Mum gave me a really good comment, and I never listened to her, because you don't listen to your mum when you're growing up. You hang around dogs, you catch fleas. Yeah. And she's right. You hang around good people, you're going to make good decisions. It's that basic. So if there's any kids watching and they're bringing people home to the house, mum and dad are going to vet them. Mum and dad are going to make sure they're good people, because they're going to walk through our door. We're going to make sure that they're decent people, because they will influence what you do. Yeah. So if we tell you that little Johnny or Jenny, they're dickheads, guess what? That's for a reason, because we've been there, we're experienced, and we know what's going on. So
if we look at, hopefully there'll be people watching this that are, struggling with whatever sort of addiction, because I think you've sort of outlined that addiction's addiction, doesn't really matter what the addiction's to. How do they, I guess addicts tend to hang out with each other, so gamblers hang out with gamblers, and I guess the danger of that is it normalises gambling. Yeah. Because you create your community of gamblers. Same if you're an alcoholic, you tend to, birds of a feather flock together kind of thing, and you hang out. And so it normalises what you're doing. Yep. But obviously, and you've indicated this, that you got to a point where you realise that actually maybe this is not normal, even though my community's saying it's normal. Yeah. Actually not. So on this issue of community, somebody that's going through that journey and then the trigger hits them, geez, I've got to take ownership of this. I need a different community. How do they do that? They're brave. It takes a lot of bravery. So straight away, the most important thing in people's lives are these things called mobile phones. That changes for just about ever for gamblers, or for any addict. So anybody that's associated with your addiction, they're gone. They're wiped. And I know it might be brutal and it might be hard, but for me, it was the best thing. And people try and get your number. People try and get in contact with you because they're being cut off. You change your number and you start again. And I did that 3 or 4 times because I had people that just would not let go. But eventually they get the message, because whilst most people, and I think this is a big problem for a lot of people sit there and think that other people are thinking about them, but they're not. Everybody's thinking about themselves. Everyone's thinking about their own journey. So Richard, no disrespect, but I'm not sitting there thinking about, oh, shit, I hope Richard's okay. I think,
absolutely, if I'm your friend, I'll be thinking about you.
Yeah.
But they're the people you want in your life. These other people that are shitbags, they're not thinking about you. What they're thinking about is how they can use you to get where they want to get to.
Mm.
So basically, you're their fuel to get their vehicle from A to B. And I think if we think about that, and this is the problem with a lot of kids, that they feel that everybody is, I don't want to do that. I don't want to make a dick of myself. I don't want to be, I don't want to be seen like that. They don't care. Because at 15, 16, 17, 18, the last thing they are worried about are other people. And I've got two teenagers. I've got an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old. My 16-year-old girl, she thinks about, I think, our family a lot more than my 18-year-old boy. My 18-year-old boy is in fairyland. He is just worrying about playing footy, working, studying, and girls. That is it. He doesn't care about mum and dad. He doesn't care about the family unit, but we expect that. We know that's what kids do.
Yeah.
So it's a good lesson for a lot of people that if you think people are sitting around worrying about you, they're not. They're worrying about themselves, just like you're worrying about yourself. And that's why, we shouldn't take offense if someone hasn't read a message on bloody Snapchat, or someone hasn't, replied to a text message or an email. It's not because they are trying to hurt you or whatever. It's just they're busy. They've got other shit on their mind. And I think we lose sight of that a fair bit. So to answer your question in a roundabout way, I think with anything we do, we've just got to stay fully focused on where we're trying to get to. So get off the phone, first and foremost, surround yourself with good people, keep busy, because keeping busy is a really important thing, and keep speaking to your friends and family, the ones that are going on the journey with you. The ones that aren't, you let them go. And you mentioned about addiction before. So it doesn't matter what you're using with addiction. So just so some people know, it's only 10% of the problem is what they're doing. So if I'm an addict, 10% of it will be either the alcohol, the drugs, the gambling, the sex, or the food. 30% will be emotional, which will be the stuff like my dad passing. Other stuff will be 30% neurological, so upstairs, and the other and the other 30% is psycho. So the addiction itself is only a very small part of it. So all the other shit that we've got inside that's going on that we have to deal with. I'm involved in a rehab centre, so I've got a partnership. So I deal with this as ongoing. So normally when people come in, they have got a caravan full of baggage. And for us, it's to untangle that baggage. And the only way to untangle that baggage is to deal with it. You suppress it. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's domestic violence, sexual abuse, if it's crime, if it's, it could be abandonment, it could be anything. If we don't deal with that, well, we've got no chance of fixing what that 10% is, because that 10% is to mask everything else they're going through.
And just on that, I'd be interested to get your feedback on this. I have a theory that a lot of elite sports people become elite because they have an addictive personality. So training and success can actually be an addiction. And that's why we have so many problems with retired elite athletes, because their whole identity gets wrapped up in what they're doing, because they're obsessed. Because you almost have to be to get to that standard. Your commitment to training has to be driven by almost an addiction to be the best, that you can be or that there is.
You have to have the most unbelievable self-belief.
Yeah.
You have to, because you think about any other workplace in the world, you are not being criticised or critiqued like little elite sports people are.
Yeah.
Every game, every training session, they are given feedback on how they're going. There is every stat, there is everything. Like they are, under the microscope like nobody else. So you've got to have great self-belief. You've got to have an amazing work rate. You've got to be able to fit into any situation. So you've got to be chameleon-like. Because if you don't, the no dickhead policy applies. So if you're too much of an outlier, you don't make it. But then you hit all the other key things, and I'll talk generally men here. Adrenaline, because most athletes are pretty pumped up with adrenaline because they've got to be, because they've got to have self-assurance and they've got to have confidence. A lot of them are single, a lot of them are blokes, a lot of them play team sport. So they hit this demographic of almost following this herd-like, mentality, almost like Halley's Comet, but they're all on board. And if one's punting, they're all punting. If one's doing drugs, they're all doing drugs. So they kind of get swept up in it. They're earning really good money. They're hanging out with high-profile individuals who are often connected with, the lifestyle of the rich and famous. So we're talking about horse racing, fast cars, tickets to every event that you can imagine, access to good-looking partners and all, it's just that sexy lifestyle. So they get swept up in it. So you're right. It's you've got to have a lot of self-assurance and a lot of self-belief. Otherwise, you don't get to the top. Because if you cop a bit of bad criticism along the way, some people just go, oh, shit, I can't do this. Where the other ones go, no, I'll prove you wrong. You get back and train twice as hard and you get out there and play a good game the next week and it's all forgotten about. So you need a lot of confidence.
Yeah. And so what, hopefully, from the marketing and everything of this particular interview, there'll be a lot of guys that obviously, because we're a men's health charity, and lots of blokes involved in sport, tuning in for this, because obviously they would be interested in your story. So how do you direct them to not go with the crowd when your conscience tells you at the club? I think every footy club, my personal view is that nearly every footy club is vulnerable to falling for the gambling problem, because every footy club you go to, you hear them, everybody's talking about what game they've put money on and who's going to get the first goal and all this sort of stuff. And I find it ironic that originally, historically, cigarette companies sponsored sport, and then they weren't allowed to. And then the alcohol companies took over, and now they're not allowed to. And it's all the gambling now. So the gambling is like getting into sport.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned that this trend with funding of sport by gambling entities is going to become overrun the sport, and it's going to become a problem within clubs. What do we do about that?
Well, at local sporting clubs, it starts with the press. It starts with the board to make strong decisions at the club. We don't mind if you gamble, but you don't gamble within our four walls. Simple as that. There's no racing on the TV. You want to watch racing, you watch it in your own time. But when you come here to train and play, we're not having gambling. A lot of the fundraisers around the punt, might be the last raffle ticket drawn out. It's it's $100 in and you win $5,000. No problem with that, because they're a one-off. It's a fundraiser, and I think getting the community together, as you spoke about, Richard, getting the 100 or 200 together to celebrate, I think that's far outweighs the problems that $100 is going to do. And you're buying drinks and your meal as part of that price. So I don't have a problem with that. It comes down to how strong your leadership is at your club. And if players don't like it, they'll walk. But eventually they'll end up with a club that are doing the right thing by the community. And the right thing by the community, and we've got to remember this, that when someone walks through the doors of any sporting club, when they walk out at the other end in 1, 2, 5, 10 years, they walk out better people.
Yeah.
If we invite them into a club that is full of the punt, the races are on, we're running casino nights every second Tuesday, they're not going to walk out better people. They're just not. Now, if we allow players to do drugs in the toilet, we know that is not who we stand for and what we're all about. It's just not. And if we find people doing drugs in the club, they get a warning. They do it a second time, you piss them off.
Yeah.
It'll become very clear very quickly to the surrounding areas that you're a no bullshit, no nonsense club, that you're there for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And far outweigh the rat bags, because the rat bags will be the minority. They truly will be. And if they become the majority, so be it. You deal with it.
Yeah, well, it was really interesting. One of our practice matches, the start of this season, we've got a young bloke whose dad played AFL, very good footballer, came to our club, and I asked him how he was finding the club. And he said to me, you just reminded me then because you used the terminology, but he said to me, it's like there's a no dickhead policy here. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, I just feel if you're a dickhead and you came to this club, you'd leave because you just wouldn't fit in. And to me, that was the greatest compliment that he could pay us as who we want to become as a community, as our footy club. I think that's the greatest compliment.
Yeah, I agree. And I do a lot of sporties, a lot of sportsman's nights. I don't know how many I do, but I do. Let's say I do 50 a year. I know within 3 minutes of walking to a footy club, netball club, cricket club, sporting, it doesn't matter which club it is. And I can tell you within 3 minutes if it's a good club or not. It's really, really simple.
Yeah.
The people running it and the people that are there sell who you are and your identity. And it's really simple.
Yeah. And I think that I forget who it was, one of the big time AFL coaches, I forget who it was, but he was famous for saying that his objective is to not just make better footballers, but to make better men.
Was that Sheeds in the early days?
I think it might have been. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Sheeds is all about community. Like Sheeds, and I think most of the coaches are most of the coaches understand it. Because when you are a coach, you're a people person, you're a people manager, and if your players and your athletes aren't being managed, and also your staff, your club disintegrates. So without cohesiveness and without a good environment, it falls over pretty quickly.
I actually reckon that Frank Costa changed the whole world of football clubs when he became president at Geelong, when he said that that strong organisations win premierships, not strong teams.
Yeah, I even go back a bit further. I reckon there was a guy at Hawthorn named Ronnie Cook, and Ronnie Cook was all about that. And then Ronnie Cook, handballed it over to, I think Ian Dicker then got involved, and Hawthorn became the
organisation.
Yeah, they did. And, and they labelled themselves a family club, and, it was really, really clever marketing and really clever, but they believed in it. Now, it might have fallen by the wayside a bit because, different regimes come through, but there's no doubt they put their stamp on the map right then and there by saying we're the family club and this is what we stand for. And things go right and wrong, but you're right. Frank and Ronnie, and there's a few pioneers out there that did bloody good work to change the perception of what footy clubs were. Because back then it was a drinking, partying, nightclubbing, get away with murder type of environment.
And I also think Peggy at Richmond has made a change, and I think it's really interesting now. This sort of move towards women being presidents is really interesting because women are probably arguably better than us at building communities.
Well, they are. So if I walk into a sports club again and I see 100 blokes in there, we're going to have a lot of fun, but it's not going to have the same impact as having 50 blokes and 50 women.
Yeah.
If you have 50 women in there, they level out the blokes, so there's no buffhead behaviour because they actually pull you back into line.
Yeah.
And it's just a better feel. It's just how you want your clubs to be. You need mums and dads, you need boys and girls to be a part of it. If you want a boys' club, well, I think go back to the 60s and 70s and you'll be able to find it. This is, times have changed, and as I said right from the beginning, you got to adapt with the times.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you get swallowed up.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting the direction I said to you at the start before we started recording that I wanted this to be organic. And I guess the thing that's really interesting as I reflect on where the conversation's gone is the importance of community and taking ownership of the communities that we're operating within, and getting back to the whole mission of Basics for Blokes is that we're all about men taking ownership of their health. And part of that is, as you've outlined, taking ownership of the community that you set yourself, that you embed yourself in, because they have such an influence. And like you're saying, you've got to identify the blokes that are unhelpful, cut them off, and then find the ones that are helpful. But the other issue too that I'm really interested to just very quickly touch on with you is, my belief is that with anything in life, the thing that's going to determine our success or otherwise and our resilience and all that sort of stuff is how strong. We must have a compelling reason why something has to change, or in other words, why. So my mantra is, I woke up one morning as a single dad with a pre-cancer condition, and that I'd ignored for 2 years, completely disregarded my health. But then one morning I woke up and thought, what if my son, what happens to my son if this becomes cancer? My little boy needed his dad. And that completely turned my world around. Can you identify a moment where you had a reason why? So my mantra now is, when I found my why, my how found me. So I think we don't have to know the process we've got to go through. We've just got to know the reason that we've got to make a change. Can you identify the why that got you to take ownership of your gambling illness?
I remember everything about stopping, but probably where things changed for me were much further down the track in 2017. My son at that stage was 13. Melbourne were playing Richmond, and Coop says, Dad, the Tigers are going to win today. I said, yeah, I know. They got Dusty, and they got Alex Rance, and they got, Cochin, who's on fire, and they got Brett Delidio, and I know Brett Delidio might have been gone, whoever. And I just said, look, all these players, they're good players, and they're much better lists than what Melbourne have got. He goes, no, Dad, they win because they're $1.13. Now, when your son's 13 or 14 years of age and he's mentioning odds in relation to who's winning the footy, that was a real moment for me where I just thought, this is bullshit. How can my 13-year-old son determine who wins a game of footy because the odds say so? And from that point on, I made it very clear that I wanted to change the narrative around sport. You win because you're a better side, you train harder, you're better prepared, you got better players, you got better cattle. Simple as that. Not because the bookmakers bloody tell me so. So I'm losing the battle at the moment in trying to get advertising decreased through gambling. But it'll come around. Like, as you said before, with smoking and alcohol, governments are just slow in catching up. And unfortunately, they're drunk on the revenues that they receive from gambling, which is always a difficult one. But hopefully that'll change in the future, because that, for me, became a real motive for change. I don't want kids going through high school, having multi-bets and doing all this sort of bullshit online because bookmakers think it's sexy to put Shaquille O'Neal or, Mark Wahlberg or, all these other, elite athletes or movie stars or whatever to sex things up. I just don't. And I'm not, gambling only affects a very small minority. So I'm not saying that it affects everybody, but I just don't think we should be shoving it down the throats of 10 to 18-year-olds the way we are. If you want to promote it, no worries. Promote it through, 18-year-old plus avenues. But when we're targeting the kids, I just don't like it. I just don't like that we're grooming the kids to, when they turn 18, shit, let's go to the casino, let's get on the punt, let's open up a TAB account, let's open up a sports bet account, let's blah, 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 blah. I don't like it. And it is grooming 101.
Yeah, and that's right. And my greatest fear is that, as you said, if it was 10% of people that gamble, for 10% of people who gambling will become a problem, but we don't know who that 10% are.
Gambling's that's the problem with gambling. Like with drug addicts, you can see it.
Yeah.
They're drawn. They've got bad teeth. They've got all that sort of stuff. Alcoholics, you can see it. They can't walk. Well, gambling, it's a hidden disease. You can't see it. You just wouldn't know.
Yeah.
You just would not know because there's no smell, there's no sight. For those that are in the industry, we know because it's through the eyes, because it's the gateway to their soul. You can pick a gambler. If I walk into a room, I can pick a gambler pretty quickly because their eyes.
Yeah.
They're just broken if they're fully blown. So, yeah. So 2017 was the moment that I got a really good insight into that I had to change some things here because I don't want my son thinking that $1.13 is normal way to look at who wins a footy match.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting that here we are, two blokes, two dads, having conversations about struggles and problems that we've had in the past. And the thing that was the motivator for both of us was the impact that it has on our kids.
Yeah. And as I said to you before, we're not in sporting clubs because of us.
Yeah.
We're in sporting clubs because we want our kids to have a pathway to find themselves.
Yeah. And a community.
Yeah.
To like I said, they're the last bastion of community. We need that community for our kids to grow up in, because often, even families, like a lot of us don't have extended family in the city that we're living in. So we don't even have family get-togethers.
No, not at all.
And our kids, might have moved from the country to the city or interstate or overseas or whatever, and all you've got is your nuclear family. The footy club becomes your adopted family, and that's, your extended family beyond just the nuclear family. And I think it's so important for all manner of applications.
And if you don't have sport in your life, that's not the be-all and end-all. There's some communities, but you've got dance, you've got a woodworking club. There's so many communities that you can be a part of that have nothing to do with sport. So if you think the sport, we're talking about sport, that's not it. We're talking about different groups that you're interested in, and everyone has hobbies and has interests. Could be bloody online. It could be gaming. It might be Gran Turismo or whatever they bloody call it. It could be whatever you want it to be. So.
Even like the men's sheds.
They're brilliant.
And they are so popular because we've got this hunger to be part of something bigger than us. And
you can also talk to somebody that is going through what you've been through.
Yeah.
And the men's shed is an amazing vehicle to not be judged, to walk in there, spill your beans, get support, and that you aren't going to be held accountable, or you're not going to be, told you're a dickhead. You're actually going to get an arm around you and say, hey, we're here for you.
And one of the other things on the other side of these issues that we're talking about, there's one thing to be the person that has a problem that's struggling and needing to get a breakthrough. But I think also one of the things that we need to do is we need to be better at how do we manage when our mates or somebody in our sphere is struggling with something. And one of the things that helped me in my training as a counsellor was to believe that everybody's doing the best with what they've got. So, and if we start from that perspective and we see somebody that's struggling, not to write them off and say, gee, he's a dickhead for doing that, isn't he? Or he's an idiot for going and get, addicted to his gambling. But then, like you, for example, classic example, I really appreciate your transparency, mate. It's really valuable for other people that you realise that underlying all of that was the trauma that you had from what happened to your dad and seeing that. So it wasn't like, even with your gambling, you were still doing the best with what you had. You didn't know that you didn't have the tools in your tool bag to deal with that. So that's why you weren't doing so well. But once you got the tools in your tool bag, you turn things around. So I think as mates, if we see our mates are doing some stupid stuff, we don't write them off and, demean them and all that sort of stuff. We need to recognise that they're doing the best with what they've got. And if they're screwing up their lives or their relationships or their finances or their health or whatever, it's because they haven't got the right tools in their tool bag to do a better job. And I think if we have that attitude towards our mates and those around us, we're going to be a much more compassionate society and community and create environments where people can heal.
It's a really good question to bring up, because I get asked this every time I speak at schools. If I know of a friend that's struggling with something, how do I approach them? And as I say to all of them, there's no right or wrong answer, but there is one thing. We're given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You speak half as much as you listen.
Yeah.
So being able to listen to that person by simply saying, if there's anything going on, I'm there for you. Yeah. I know you might be struggling a bit. I'm not judging you, but I'm here to listen. And if I can help you, great. If I can't, well, no worries. We'll find someone else that can. And I think it's a simple message that where people go, oh, hang on. He's not actually judging me for what I'm going through. He's just offering, an olive branch to try and help me through that situation. As soon as you go, hey, Richard, what a dick. Get off the punt, mate. I know you're doing drugs every weekend. What are you going to do? You're going to put the wall up and say, no, thank you. Yeah. But if you say it in a way, and it's a real compassionate way, hey, if you want to have a cup of coffee and have a chat anytime, I'm there for you.
Yeah.
And straight away they're thinking, oh shit, he actually cares about me.
Hmm.
And it's straight away that person is not combative, they're not defensive, they're there to help. And you know what? You'll probably say it to him 4 or 5 times, or her 4 or 5 times. You'll get them on the 6th time, or the 7th, or the 10th, or the 20th time. But eventually they'll say, hey, Rich, do you mind if I have a chat to you? I only need 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You'll sit down and you'll talk for 2 or 3 hours. And then you'll become chances are you become half a mentor, and the rehabilitation for that individual begins. So it's really important that you listen and not talk to or talk down. And no matter how frustrated you are, because we've all got mates that you can just see them self-destructing. You just got to say, hey, Jack, I'm here for you, mate. I know you love the punt. I know you love to drink. But if ever you want to have a chat about it, I'm not judging. If you want to have a chat about it, my door's always open.
Yeah. No, I think that's so true, because that's the other critical part of what we need to do. Is it's no use getting people prepared to be vulnerable and share their difficulties and challenges if we don't also prepare the people around them to be appropriate in the way they respond to that. I think
that's right.
That's as much of our objective with Basics for Blokes, is to get blokes to be better mates.
Yep.
And it's not always calling people out. It's just being available.
Just being a support for them.
And just around.
Yeah.
I find at the footy club as the chaplain, sometimes I feel like I'm just wasting my time because I'm not doing anything. But the issue is that I'm being seen there. And then when somebody does have an issue, there's enough relationship there and familiarity that they'll call me aside and want to have a chat. And
That's right.
Quite often, it's not necessarily one of the footballers. It might be one of the dads or one of the mums or a brother or sister. And again, comes back to this thing, and I know we're harping on sporting clubs, but whatever community it is, that's what being in a community is all about.
Indeed.
Is identifying that. And I think the more we get back to living life as members of community in relationship, we've got a much better chance of making the world a better place.
Agreed.
All right. Well, time to call it quits. Certainly appreciate your time, mate.
No, pleasure.
As a passionate Melbourne supporter, I feel an honour to have sat down and chatted to you.
No, thank you. Hopefully it helps people. And the journey of life isn't an easy one. And the more people got helping us, and the more people you're helping, I think the better the results will be. So I think what you're doing with Basics for Blokes is brilliant, and you're going to help a lot of people. Yep, appreciate that. And it's the support of blokes like you that makes us able to do it. So really appreciate your time, and hopefully it won't be our last chat. Thanks, Richard. All right, all the best, mate. See you later. Cheers, mate. Thank you.